It's beautiful. I want to comment something actually. When you showed us these pictures in Louvre about your porcelain work, what we see is the antiques together with the contemporary art. These objects talk to each other from centuries away. And this is again the language here, the language of aesthetics. So again,
It was,
this is the
there are
artist's perspective.
there
Tell
are
us
two,
about that.
two reasons. But the first one's that even in 86, my show was called Kunstkammer, was a room of art. So there's always been a historical perspective. But more of that, the white cubes and the white museums of contemporary art in the 90s didn't want to show my work.
I see.
So the thing was that in a lot of white cubes in the 80s and 90s, nobody wanted to show my work. So what I did was to find new spaces. And the new spaces I found were museums of historical art. Today, that's why also Rosa Martinez, Yerebatan Cistern were possible, because I was from the beginning interested in history as being part of a chain, being part of a history, not a white cube, not starting from zero, no. So today that's become very fashionable.
Exactly.
It's all over the place. But in the 80s, it wasn't. Mm-hmm. So there, for me, I showed in an abandoned prison, in an abandoned quarantine. I showed my work in a Renaissance castle. And so it was logic when we did this project in the Louvre with Marie-Laure Bernadac. Was a group show. It was, for me, it was pure logic. But I had been doing those types of projects already for a long, long time, because there was always a real reason. Apart from aesthetics, it was not only to me beautiful, it was not only to be nice, it was because there is a real reason for showing, for instance, this piece on the left in Sèvres stoneware with Palissy ware on the left, these plates. It's too difficult to explain now, but these plates are about alchemy, they're about transformation, they are about studies of nature, they are very complex pieces that had always been regarded as decorative, but that I regarded as being philosophical and as being complex reflections on a revolution in France between the Middle Ages and this kind of Renaissance, new birth with color and so on. So when you bring people to the Louvre to see this show, it's not just for something beautiful. It's also because behind it, there is an amount of meaning that is that can change your understanding of both pieces, of the historical piece and about the contemporary piece.
Exactly. I want to give you another example. I've seen a show at National Gallery of Canada in Ottawa. They were showing some native art, handcraft objects together with contemporary art. So this is a new trend telling us that maybe craftsmanship and contemporary art should start talking at some point. And then comes my next question. So first, let me have your views on that. What do you think? between these?
But I think it's not only about being fashionable, of a dialogue between crafts and contemporary art. That's what I mean with there has to be a reason. There has to be a reason. There has to be a reflection. There has to be a real purpose. So, and I trust curators, and I trust critics, and I trust artists to be smart enough and to be sensible enough to know when it's necessary. Because at some point I went also to make shows in white cubes because that's what I needed. So but the fact that there's no longer a kind of wall between craft and fine arts, between low art and high art, between emotions and intellect, all these things that today for young artists, there is a freedom of taking things from every part of the world and the art world. And that's something that was very different in the 80s. In the 80s, there was a wall between clay and the Contemporary Art Museum. There was a wall between textiles and the Contemporary Art Museum.
Exactly, because they were considered as handcrafts, and handcrafts were artisanship were
handcrafts. You see, you show your hands. You work with these. Mm-hmm. When you work with your hands, you are stupid, because the one who works with his hands is considered in our society still to be somebody who is stupid, who's poor, who's stupid, who is, I hate that idea. For me, it's the opposite. But for a lot of artists at that point, it was the one who worked with his head, who was the smart artist, against the artist who would work with his hands. I think today those borderlines have also been crossed 1,000 times, and it's much more fluid.
Yeah. So I'm happy to observe that too. And the exhibition in Ottawa, it was kind of the trend of paying homage to natives in general, and recognition of native arts, handcrafts, and this is something that we have been familiar in Australia with Aboriginal art. And I hope Canadian native art, Inuit art somehow will be also part of the contemporary art.
Yes, but I think you have to, but this is a very different story. It's almost a different talk. It's about when you show tribal art, primitive art, artisans, and so on, they're very different stories. So you've got to watch out that it's not plunder, that it's not just, okay, this year we're going to take Isnik artisans and we're going to show them with contemporary art, and it just becomes plunder. I think when you show it, you've got to show it with respect. You've got to show it with, with respect. You've got to also put it in context so people understand where it comes from, and so on and so on. But those are reflections that already in La Langue, you remember the piece I was carrying.
Yes.
They already are in La Langue. It would be interesting for somebody to reflect on that piece and to ask, yes, that piece also poses the questions of what's the difference between contemporary art and tribal art? What's the difference between a contemporary art object and a tribal object, and so on?
Yes. Now, let's come to Iznik tiles, and within that, much general, if you want, question related to Ottoman art and in general Eastern, let's say, Orientalist art. Turkish carpets, İznik tiles are very famous, but somehow we couldn't really be able to incorporate these craftsmanship into contemporary art to make it known throughout the world. What do you think about this technique? And do you think a foreign artist can be involved in such a local craftsmanship?
But the first thing you've got to, I'm not an expert in the arts you talk about, but I know that these carpets, for instance, some of the carpets that I know, that they are in their time the most technically advanced, sophisticated products of their time. Those carpets at the time where there was a link between Asia, India, and the Middle East. And these carpets were made, some of them were made for a European market. So they are the opposite of a local tribal carpet. They are very, very sophisticated objects made with designs that are designs linking their own traditions with Indian traditions, with motifs that come from China. If you look at the feathers or the clouds that you find in the carpets from the Orient, the cloud motif comes directly from the Chinese. The colors sometimes come from India. The technique and the drawings of these carpets, they are absolutely unbelievably technically stunning because of mathematics and geometry. The drawing shifts of these carpets, it's like today's computer. So they are not, they are very sophisticated things. And to get back to your question, so then they were part also of a global economy. They are not only local carpets, like I say, they are shipped to another part of the world. They are, to produce a carpet like that, that's 7 meters long, you need the most of it. So today's artists should think of how can we make things that today are, we're not going to remake 17th century Isfahan carpets.
Of course.
We are going to try and invent something that has this cross-cultural complexity, that has technical brilliance, invention. Artists have to, try and, I don't say I do it because I cannot do it. That's why you need young artists who say, look, okay, what can we do that's so, that's what can we invent? That's what I'm waiting for. It's the invention of new artists. And if they understand that the rug, what's a good Turkish rug, where would that come from?
Kayseri silk carpet, I would name.
Yeah.
Hereke or hereke.
Yeah.
Wool
I
carpet.
don't know those very well. No, I know a little bit more, maybe.
But this was just sub question, but yeah. Mostly tiles. Okay, so you work with clay and ceramics, and
but it's the same thing. It's the tiles. You showed me these tiles. Huh? Mm-hmm. This tile is technically, it's a miracle because you've got the red that asks for a typical type of firing. The drawing is a drawing that needs math, because you've got to think about the structure of the global drawing. It's also about balance between shape and color, void and filled up areas. It's about the observation of nature, and it's certainly also about politics. But I don't know enough about the culture to know if the tulip that's in the center, the blue tulip, is linked also to politics. Anyway, it's linked to global commerce. So it's a very sophisticated object that at the same time also has it works in a room. So it's linked to architecture. And as architecture, it's also linked to climate, because it's linked to the fact that it keeps a room clean and not only clean, cool. So the thing is, when I look at a thing like this, I see so many different things that have nothing to do just with a tile. A tile is beauty. It's beautiful. It's something I can look at this tile for so long. It's so fantastic. But if I go to Topkapi, you say?
Yes.
To the palace, and I see the rooms, I think that today somebody who is in industry, a young artist who has an uncle who has a porcelain factory and who says, I'm going to think about 3D printing in ceramics, where all the ideas of climate change and ventilation and producing with less materials and so on, and design, that's where you've got to invent. And that this young man says, I'm going to make tiles that you can make it, put in the airport. They're printed in such a way that there's an airstream against the walls that will cool the building. That's when Eastnic tiles will be world famous again.
I see. Okay, thank you. Now, on your library, I see a sculpture of yours. Actually, it's I was going to say a smaller version of the big one that I've seen in Istanbul. Now, tell me, do you have editions? What do you think about editions?
Editions, we're jumping, I think, because we had planned to talk a little bit about Perrotin, but we can do that afterwards. Editions. But editions are important here. This is on the left-hand side, you see a bronze edition that you see here in the library behind me. I publish a lot of books. I make small editions because of the fact that the people who bought my pieces when I was 15 in Belgium, they are maybe now 85. They cannot buy my work at 50,000 euros. They still follow, but at 3,000 euros, they can still buy a work. And I find it important also that young collectors, a small edition, it can be 3,000 euros. It's already a lot of money. But I find it important that some of these objects, they start out as small, like this one started out small, that they can have a different kind of life. Not everybody can put a 5-meter high sculpture that's $500,000 outside of his home. So the idea is also that there's a very almost democratic idea that some of the editions are accessible. And I love living with these also. I love living with these small sculptures. most of the time when I go to, I always go to Ibis Hotel. It's like a very cheap hotel. I take a little sculpture with me and I put it next to my bed. And I'm home. So for me, that's really important also.